quiet. What have you done now?
Come in, Kronsteen.
I've planned for SPECTRE to steal from the Russians their new Lektor decoding machine. Neither the Russians nor the British will be aware that they are now working for us.
You're sure this plan is foolproof?
Yes, it is. Because I have anticipated every possible variation of counter-move.
Except for one thing.
Now, Mr. Bond here. I've never even heard of a Tatiana Romanova.
Of course, girls do fall in love with pictures of film stars.
So you're Tatiana Romanova?
You look just like your photograph.
No, it's some sort of trap.
And the bait is a cipher machine. If there's any chance of us getting a Lektor, we simply must look into it.
Welcome to Istanbul.
How is she going to get the machine over to us? She's leaving that to me. She'll do anything I say.
Anything. My friend, she's got you dangling.
That doesn't matter. All I want is that Lektor.
Oh?
Well.
An ordinary black leather case. On the side here, flat throwing knife.
My orders are to kill you and deliver the Lektor. How I do, it's my business.
Let his death be a particularly unpleasant and humiliating one.
Tell me, which lunatic asylum did they get you out of?
Take it easy, 007. My escape route's only for one. Life in Istanbul will never be the same without you.
That would be splendid.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bond, James Bond, with your host, Mike Kalinowski, and myself, Brad Gilmore, promoting our brand new book, Bond, James Bond, exploring the shaken and stirred history of Ian Fleming's 007. This will be a limited podcast series that will dive into every single James Bond movie, and we will break them down. We will give our opinions, our hot takes, or whatever comes across our mind in the world of MI6's greatest secret agent, James Bond 007. We hope that you enjoy the podcast, so much so that you go to bondjamesbondbook.com and order our brand new book, available on bondjamesbondbook.com or wherever books are sold. Let's enjoy the podcast.
From Russia with love, I fly to you, much wiser since
And here we are back on Bond, James Bond, the official companion podcast to the book, Bond, James Bond, exploring the shaken and stirred history of Ian Fleming's 007. We are your authors of the book. First, the incredible Mr. Mike Kalinowski. Mike, how you doing?
Good, buddy. How are you? How you doing?
I'm well. My name is Brad Gilmore. We're talking about today From Russia with Love that came out in 1963, the second outing of Mr. Sean Connery as Agent James Bond 007. Actually came out on October 10th, 1963 was the premiere in London. Didn't come out in the United States until the following year, in 1964, according to Wikipedia. And the movie had a $2 million budget, got $79 million at the box office, which by today's standards would be a massive flop for a Bond movie. If it got $79 million, can you imagine?
So funny doing box office for all these films and just like what they made, but then like, you know, you adjust for today's dollars and inflation. You're like, every one of them was successful. Every one of them.
They crushed it.
Just the amount of money they made.
But a $2 million budget wouldn't even get half. It would get 3 pages of dialogue from Daniel Craig.
If that. Yeah.
It's just so funny. But From Russia with Love is the second in the series, and I think it picks up on all the great things about the Dr. No installment of the series and really adds more of the formula of Bond, because whether it's good or bad, the Bond movies are, until Craig, so formulaic. We know we're getting the cold open, the gun barrel, the music with the scantily clad or silhouettes of scantily clad women.
Yeah.
And then we're into the story that's always got some silly villain of some kind. And we kind of get into the formula of the movies, but this one helps further establish it. I don't think it's there yet. It's almost fully Bond. Right. But the opening song doesn't even have lyrics in the opening credits. I think it's at the end it has it.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm trying to remember. I think it was Matt Monroe.
Mm-hmm, that sounds right.
I'm like, he was the song, but again, it doesn't play like we would think with the normal song, like the way it normally does. With John Barry, of course, doing the score with this one. But again, you're right with his song. It's from Russia with love, it's so funny. Anytime anyone sings the Bond songs, you always got to sing it like the singer. Terribly.
Yeah.
I'm always going, we have all the time in the world.
Goldfinger.
Goldfinger. They're so great. That's why they're so memorable. But yeah, again, you're right. Like, it was, I writing this book, it was like, there's so much information from so many different sources, but and it's like I found so many people were torn, and I'm kind of torn too with which Bond film solidified the formula of Bond. Mm-hmm. And there are many camps that say From Russia with Love, and a lot of people say Goldfinger, and I'm kind of torn. I kind of feel all the great, because From Russia with Love is like a true classic spy film. It just had this kind of. Bond films always have a travelogue feel. It's like you're going on this travelogue and you're going all around the world. And I felt that for the first time with this film as opposed to Dr. No. And again, when you've increased your budget, you kind of do that. But again, it's not, like you said, it's not quite Goldfinger level yet. But there's just so much great stuff in there with this movie.
Well, what I loved at the beginning of the movie, where we see Bond, he's in his green Bentley convertible, which was from the books, is what Bond drove a lot of the time in the Fleming novels, and he's with Sylvia Trench, who's the woman he meets at the Baccarat table.
Yeah, in the first one.
In Dr. No. So this was them giving some continuity. He kind of charmed this woman in the first movie, which, by the way, I always wanted to ask you what you thought, just to go back to Dr. No for a half second, is in the opening scene when he says, Bond, James Bond, with the cigarette hanging out of his mouth and just
dangling there like only Connery could pull off.
Only
you and I try it, we look like we're having half of a stroke, half of our face is stroke. Like Connery does it. It's like, it just cool. He epitomizes cool.
He's so cool when he does it. But I always wondered, because I heard somebody float this before, and I can't remember where I heard it, but she introduces herself as Trench, Sylvia Trench, initially. And then she goes, and you all, and then he says Bond, James Bond. Is that him mimicking her? And then it just became iconic? Or is that how people introduced themselves in the 60s? Like, I don't know.
I think you and I I would bring that back, but my name would kill it. You could pull it off with your name.
Gilmore, Brad Gilmore.
Brad Gilmore.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine would be terrible. I've never heard that either from anyone.
Yeah, because she says, my name's Trench.
I lived with this book for about two years, almost. Almost 2 years I lived with this book. And I don't think I've ever heard that or came across. I certainly didn't make that connection when I watched it. One thing I did notice with Trench, and someone pointed it out, and I saw it again, is like she's married at one point, and then when she's alone with Bond, she takes the ring off.
I know.
Someone picked that up, and I went on our rewatch when I went back to rewatch them all about 2 years ago. I was like, oh, that's a great little thing. Whoever, that little thing that they put in there, that really doesn't pay off in the storyline, but it's such a great little character moment. But to see her pop up again, it's like these early Bond films, not early, all the ones up in Craig, there was really no thought of doing continuity. But this was interesting going from Dr. No to this. There was continuity. So when did that change as well? It's a kind of a cool thing in the history of Bond to think about.
Yeah, Sylvia Trench continues on. It's not the last that we hear from her, but this is where Bond's kind of called off into the mission of the movie. But let me ask you, Lois Maxwell plays Moneypenny for quite some time. She has a great run with the character. She's actually a Canadian actress who had no real. I don't think she even tried to pretend to be British at any point.
No,
her accent was just her accent, which. Again, going back to Connery, like we talked about in Dr. No, I never questioned the fact that she didn't have an English accent, but she was the secretary to the guy who's in charge of the British Secret Service.
Right. It's like, you don't question it. I want to say that Caroline Bliss, who was Moneypenny after her, did have one. She absolutely did. Yeah. And then Samantha Bond has one.
And then Naomi Harris, of course.
Yeah, of course. It's another thing. Like you live with these movies for so long, like we do, and maybe other people are like, yeah, I noticed that, and it was weird. I was like, I just never noticed it. Didn't care.
No, it made no difference to me.
No,
this movie is interesting in the plot because it's twofold. One, you have Bond trying to get a transcoder machine. From Russia, and then
I had a hard time following this plot no matter how many times I watched this movie. Maybe
I agree. Yeah. I agree, and
it's tough to follow.
As a Connery fan, I love the Connery movies. Most people put this one up very high. If you're a Connery guy, I don't put this one up as high personally because of it was so hard to follow. It's like, okay, is she a triple agent? She's like a double agent, but then she turns good, so she's like a triple agent.
It's like and again, there's the whole thing with whether it's gypsies, and that's not, again, Bond being a period of the time, it was a piece of the time, it was different, and the Romani people. So then that all comes involved in it, but then they've just got such great set pieces, and you got Red Grant and Rosa Klebb, and that kind of balances out for me the stuff I'm kind of following with just these great, that opening, with Red Grant and all that was just so great.
Oh, yeah, that is one to where, again, when I was doing a rewatch with my fiance and she is watching it and they kill what we think is Bond after he's going through the maze and Red Grant strangles him. It is a very chilling moment at first until they pull off the mask. Which is the greatest prosthetics in the history. If we're meant to believe this, Spectre knew special effects better than anybody in Hollywood ever would. The most realistic mask in the world. But Red Grant, I think, is a great Bond villain because he's almost like we were talking about with Jack Lord as Felix Leiter. He's almost a mirror image of Bond in some ways. A little bit more ruthless, a little bit more of a blunt instrument. And I loved kind of the twofold plot line. This is the one thing I did like of the story is you have this stuff going on with Romanoff, but really the movie is centered around Red Grant being a hired gun for Spectre to go in and try to assassinate Bond because they're mad at what he did in Dr. No. At least that's what I gathered.
Right. Again, like now saying it and you think about it, like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But when you're watching the movie, it just doesn't connect.
It doesn't
I don't
translate.
know if it was the way the filmmaking, filmmaking has changed over the years in the way that they edit things and cut things and the flow. And it doesn't, like you saying it right now, is like, that makes perfect sense. And yes, that's what it should be. But when you're watching it, you're like, I don't know. Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah.
Now, do you think of this? Because my introduction to Robert Shaw is, of course, Jaws.
Yeah.
That's who I knew him as. So when I found that they were the same actor, I forgot how young I was at the time, it was mind-boggling to me. I could not fathom this. Like these were the same two actors. But I mean, it was Robert Shaw, famous Quint, and Red Grant. So it's just like he's so good in the movie and provides one of the best fight scenes I think in a Bond film. And there's so much that works in this film for me.
I didn't think that it was the same Robert Shaw. You know, I didn't think that they must have just been an actor with the same name. Because forever,
I know. You don't think, because they're so vastly different. He's got the blonde hair, and like one guy's I watch Robert Shaw in Jaws, and I'm like, that's how that actor really is. A drunk showing up on set because he's so good. But then just to see him as, Red Grant, you're like, oh man, you are a badass. And just but again, I mean, it wasn't that many years, 20 years difference.
Mm-hmm.
That's not, in the grand scheme of things, huge, but he shows how good an actor he is.
He looked very different. This did have what became kind of, at least it's happened more than once in Bond movies, but this was the first great train fight and train scene in a James Bond film. This kind of becomes somewhat of a staple. We see train sequences throughout the Bond films. There's a couple memorable ones in the Craig movies, especially in Spectre. There's the fight with Hinks on the train. Something very Bond about being on a train, right?
I think like you said, especially nowadays, no one really travels by train anymore because of airplanes. You can get everywhere. But back then, trains, it was just like a romanticism about it, being on a train and traveling Europe. And Spectre made a really great, the whole thing being an homage to From Russia with Love. It just has a different feel about it. It just, you're right. There's a romanticism about it that I think really helps the film.
And when you think about it from a filmmaking perspective, you have two guys fighting in a very enclosed space.
Yeah.
That's also mobile. There's all these great things about a train sequence. I heard Robert Zemeckis talk about when he was filming Back to the Future 3, how he realized why people like making Westerns where trains were involved, because it's a kinetic, very easy story to tell. You have motion, you have action. The train has to start and stop at certain places. There's a lot of drama that you can make into it.
It's funny you say that, because I think another thing, and we'll talk about it in several films down the line, I feel the same way with snow. There's just something about an action scene in snow, and a friend of mine who's a filmmaker saying it's like, because it's the white contrast, everything, you get blood on it. If the gunfire reflects off it really well, it's just has such a great thing. And it's trains now. I didn't think about it, but it is. There's so much involved. You've got a sense of motion, a sense of a stop and a start. At some point, you're gonna have to stop and start. You've got a running clock, almost like it helps. It's a physical thing moving, but it also helps the film on its physical moving, and it just adds ratchets up the tension a lot. Yeah.
It does. We had Daniela Bianchi as Tatiana Romanoff, who was breathtakingly gorgeous in this movie. I can't imagine how much she was probably mauled by people back in the 1960s. She probably couldn't go anywhere after this movie came out. But the weird thing about some of these early Bonds is her dialogue, as well as Ursula Andress, they were both dubbed by different actresses after that came out, which, again, is something that you don't pick up on when you're younger.
Never. When hearing throughout the Bond films of who was dubbed and who was not, I was just like, I had no clue. No clue.
But let me ask you this.
Even if you watch now, you're like, what's up?
You're an actor. Tell me how you would feel if you spent months working on a project, learning dialogue, shooting, taking scene after scene, take after take. You finally are done with it, and then they call you and be like, oh, yeah, hey, Mike, by the way, we completely dubbed your audio.
Well, that's a kick in the, whatever. Like, takes the wind out of your sails. I mean, I think for me, the biggest one that had to just crushed him was Flash Gordon. Sam Jones was dubbed in Flash Gordon. There's history and drama behind why that had happened and for what reasons, but it's gotta suck. But these were European actresses at the time, and I think we'll get to another person who was dubbed later on, and I was like, oh, that's a big one, and that's a huge reason why. But with the girls, maybe. And then you think, were they told? Did they tell them?
Can you imagine?
Maybe they showed up at the premiere and they're like, "I don't sound like that." It's like, it's okay. It's the music. The audio people, they upped and down the tempo and the pitch. Yeah, it's you, babe.
That's you. Don't even worry about it.
I don't know. But that's got to be. I don't know. I've never done any kind of foreign language film or any kind of foreign language TV, so I don't know. But I hate my own voice anyway. So if someone wanted to dub me, I'd be happy with it. Give me a nicer, deeper sounding, voice. I'd be happy with it.
Also, we meet Desmond Llewellyn in this movie.
Yes.
Major Boothroyd, Q, the leader of the Q branch, obviously. He gives Bond one of my favorite Bond gadgets ever, the attaché case that has all kinds of things, including a roll of gold bullion, because you never know when you're going to need it.
Like a tape dispenser. He's got out that thing. He's like, okay, bullion. This was the one with radioactive lint too, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you see that and you're like, oh, all right, fair enough. But again, I think that's why people love this one, because the gadgets weren't ridiculous yet.
Oh, you're saying there wasn't an invisible car in this one?
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like, what was? I was like, I don't know if I even think of some of his gadgets are ridiculous. Like, oh yeah, there's a couple. There's a few that were like designed just for that movie and just for that one particular scene that he would never be able to use again, like that inflatable coat and The World Is Not Enough. Like, what?
Or didn't Q have a rocket launcher out of his cast, like his broken leg cast? Yeah. It's like, what situation do I need to be in for this?
Yeah, where's this going to come in handy? But so the briefcase, I mean, that was like the first. Ooh, he's got gadgets. These are cool.
Yeah, and that's another thing that became a staple of Bond movies, just the gadgets and the spy thing. And I started to, especially from Die Another Day on, when I would see them in the theaters. But even when I go back and watch, you kind of try to reverse engineer what the gadget's going to be used for. It's like, okay, what does Bond need this magnetic watch that'll unzip a woman's dress without him touching it? Like, what is the practicality of this? And you try to say, I wonder if he's going to be in some place where he needs him. I guess he's going to need a magnet at some point.
God, thinking about that now, you're like, what does Bond need a capsule that's going to explode someone, like make them inflate for? Why is he got to have that? Okay, yeah, that's right.
Like some of them
are so good. Mm-hmm. Some of them are so damn great. And you're like, that's what he would have. Other ones, you're like, there's a plot device that's going to come in about an hour into this film where this is going to come in perfect.
You're going to have just the thing. And Bond started to, and Connery really, and then Moore is very guilty of this. But this is where, and getting into Goldfinger, where Sean Connery and James Bond becomes the all-knowing figure. Where you ask James Bond, M would call him in, Bond, tell me what you know about gold. Oh, well, I know everything there is to know ever about gold. I can tell you its atomic weight. What do you need to know? Its current trade value. I know exactly everything you need to know about gold, right? I mean, that was kind of a thing that happened in the movies.
Yeah. The little introduction scene. He's like, what do you know about Elliot Carver? Worldwide media baron. Owns this, and this, head of this. Like, okay. Yeah. It's so funny. Like, you think about, you say that. I don't even know if I ever thought. I'm so used to the Bond staple. Like, he comes in, they got the scene with them, he gets the mission briefing, and he knows this and that. But I didn't ever. Now I'm going to watch those again, and it's going to stick out like a sore thumb to me.
Like that he knows everything.
What do you know about Hugo Drax? Well, this and this and this.
Yeah, born in 1942. He was,
he's like, a well-read individual.
He knows everything. Yeah. I think that there's only one, and I think they even play on it in Diamonds Are Forever. I think they ask him, "What do you know about diamonds?" He goes, it's a lady wears it on her third finger of her left hand, and next to a dog, it's a girl's best friend. I think that's all he says that he knows about diamonds, which is great. This movie, again, is many people's favorite James Bond film, and if we're going to get into a little bit of trivia from it, Sir Sean Connery said this was his favorite Bond movie that he ever did, and his favorite of his Bond movies.
Okay.
Yeah, and for a little bit of United States history, in 1961, in a list published by Life magazine, then President John F. Kennedy listed From Russia with Love as one of his top 10 favorite novels of all time. And then it was reported in the book Death of a President by William Manchester. This was the last movie JFK ever saw at a private screening in the White House on November 20th, 1963. That is just 2 days before he was killed in Dallas.
Wow. I did not know that second piece. Like I knew it was his favorite book, and it was kind of the impetus for a lot of Bond being able to move forward into theaters and to get the ball rolling with the films and I think like once it was published that was his favorite, the sales went ridiculous on it, this beloved president. But he wrote 2 days before he was killed, huh?
Wow. Insane. Steven Spielberg watched this movie during the casting process of Jaws, and that's where he said, hey, Robert Shaw would be perfect in this film.
Is it okay? That goes back to what we said. How do you see that? How do you see this film and go, yeah, this drunk alcoholic, just washed up curmudgeon of a sea barnacle that has a thing against a shark is going to be perfect after this like perfect blonde specimen? Like that's fascinating to me. Fascinating.
He saw something. in him that would have
clearly
done it.
It was the right thing. Whatever he did, that's why he's Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, that's why it's the GOAT. Also, the scene where James Bond and Tatiana Romanoff meet for the first time in the hotel suite has since been used, since From Russia with Love, as a chemistry test for Bond actors and Bond girls. You can see this in many making of documentaries, including Octopussy. So they would use that scene kind of as the read through to see if you had chemistry.
Oh, fascinating.
And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
I'm going to say one thing after you're done here about this film and my thoughts on it.
Last little bit of trivia that I found interesting was, of course, this is the first time we saw Desmond Llewellyn as Q. He wasn't in Dr. No, and he would go on to play Q in 16 subsequent Bond movies, although we did not see him in Live and Let Die. He did go all the way up into, was it World Is Not Enough? That was the last one he was in?
He did, yeah, because they introduced R.
Yeah, they have R.
Yeah, I mean, at the
John
time
Cleese.
they didn't realize like he was introducing a replacement kind of because he's like, I'm getting too old for this, and these lines of dialogue, I can't do this anymore. Let's give me a sidekick. And then it was befitting because he does that that final line of always have an escape plan when he's going down to the ground, and that kind of tender moment with him and Pierce, and they never really had it was kind of a nice little goodbye for him, but it was never an official,
Yeah, and then unfortunately he passes in a car accident.
But I'll say this about this film. Yeah, Connery to me, and I know it's the times, his clothing and all his films for me just doesn't work. But he's on the boat with her and he's got the blue blazer with the ascot and the captain's hat. That picture, man, I'm sorry. I can't. We'll talk about it.
It's not very James
when we're
Bond.
done with this. And when this book comes out, I'm sure of lots to talk about. But my God, that outfit in this film, who thought that was a cool idea? Blue blazer, an ascot, and a captain's hat that like a 5-year-old would have going on a boat trip somewhere. I can't, dude.
It's we'll talk about it in Goldfinger. He also has a very interesting outfit in Goldfinger. Very, very interesting outfit in Goldfinger that I want to get to. But last thing before we wrap this one up, we're gonna play our tomato meter game. Mike Kalinowski, From Russia with Love, 1900
so far.
63 is 1 hour and 58 minutes in length. An 84% score on Rotten Tomatoes based on 50,000 ratings. That's the audience score. What is the tomato meter?
And from Dr. No was 95?
95.
95. All right. You know what? I'm going 97%.
And the Rotten Tomatoes score for From Russia with Love, certified fresh at 97% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah!
The critics said the second James Bond film, From Russia with Love, is a razor-sharp, briskly paced Cold War thriller that features several electrifying action scenes. You nailed it, Mike.
Hot damn. So we got like 23 of these left. I think that's probably the only one I'm going to get. I might go No Time to Die because I probably remember that one.
We'll see.
But I'm going to take my win. I'm going to take my win with this one because I don't know if I'll ever get them again.
Take your win.
Because I know so many people love, I know they love Dr. No, but they love this one more. So I knew it had to be higher.
Yeah.
This is the one that like a lot of Connery fans, they like you said, Connery fans, this is their favorite of his films.
Yeah, and this is
a good majority of them.
This is Sean Connery's favorite as well. So that is From Russia with Love in 1963. We got plenty more Bond for you on this podcast.
Yes, sir.
Looking back, and again, our book is available. That is Bond, James Bond, Exploring the Shaken and Stirred History of Ian Fleming's 007. It's available on Amazon.com or wherever you pre-order or buy your books. You can get it on that website, and you can follow yourself where, Mike?
At Mike Kalinowski. Pretty simple.
At Mike Kalinowski. And you can follow me on all social media at Brad Gilmore. And for all of the fans out here, this podcast will return with Goldfinger. Until next time, guys.
Goldfinger.
Oh, Brad, what have you done now? Oh, Brad, what have you done now?